Jody, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. And Lisa, I am honored to be here with you. I mean, Jody said it best, but I wanted to give our audience a number to chew on, which is 3,000%. That is how much AMD shares have shot up since you have been CEO of this company. So I just wanted to start off by asking, you've made thousands of decisions between then and now, but if there's one thing that you did right, what do you think that one thing is?
Well, first of all, Emily, thank you for being here with us, and thanks, Jody, for really putting together this wonderful event. And we all know we would be much happier if we were in person. So we were supposed to be at Marvell this week, but this will have to do. So Emily, look, it's great to be here, and it's great to be able to talk to. I think I heard there were 1,100 people registered for this event. As CEO, if I were to say, the one thing, I don't know if there's one thing, it's hard to say one thing, but I would say, for any team, for any large teams, for any large endeavors, and certainly for AMD, it was about setting sort of very ambitious goals in terms of what we wanted to do and what we could do. And recognizing that it's a journey, so it's going to take whatever 5 years. Semiconductors, hardware takes time, so it was going to take some time, but in the process, we built a very strong culture that was all about how do we keep aspiring to do something that people think isn't quite possible, and continue to learn along the way. So I very much believe that we all learn every single day. We learn something new, and if we're able to apply that to the next problem, then it's a good thing.
Our audience is filled with everyone from university students to senior executives in the chip industry. And if they didn't know about the shortage at the beginning of the pandemic, they certainly do now. I mean, the chip shortage has been front page news. You can't get the phone, the car, the smart refrigerator you want. Elon Musk is even complaining. Give us a status update. Where do you think the chip shortage will be at the end of this year? When will we be fully past it?
Yeah, well, Emily, I mean, I always want to start, especially for, this audience, because all of us are working in the semiconductor industry. I mean, we should start with, look, semiconductors are like now super important, right? We are absolutely essential. And, we all believe we were always important, but now everybody knows what a semiconductor is. And, the truth is, the demand environment just took a big step up, right? People started to realize how important digitization was, devices were. Everybody wanted an upgrade. And so there was just a big step up in demand, and we've had to normalize and get more capacity. So yes, there are shortages, but I always try to remind people, it's such a high baseline that we're operating on. I mean, we're talking, this year about, shipping, something like 340 million PCs. I mean, that is just so much higher than just, 2 years ago. So if you think about that, the entire industry is working hard. I know many people in this forum are working hard. Many people in the ecosystem are working hard, and it's being driven aggressively to increase capacity, and we're making progress. So, to answer your question directly, I would say it's different for different markets, depending on whether you're in analog or you're in, high performance processors, or, you're in other areas. But I think it's still quite tight through the end of this year and into the first half of next year. But a lot of capacity is coming online in 2022, and I think we'll start to see things get better. But overall, I think this trend of everyone needs more semiconductors, whether it's for your home, your workplace, you're a business doing digital transformation, or your car. Everyone needs semiconductors. That's a good thing for our industry. And so I think, it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have, and one that we're fully capable of solving.
So does that mean demand is only going to skyrocket for chips? And if so, what are some lessons that the industry is and should be taking from the last 18 months to prevent the next one?
Yeah, great question, Emily. I do think it means demand continues to go up, right? We talk about the semiconductor industry right now as a $500 billion industry, and it's on its way to $1 trillion. And, you can question, is that 5 years? Is that 10 years? Whatever. But it's a large growing industry. And I think that's different. The thing that's different this time around, what I see in the industry, and certainly with with our peer companies and our partner companies, and the customers are, there's now a lot more collaboration in terms of doing long-term planning. Right? It used to be, I mean, honestly, sometimes you would think only 3 or 6 months ahead. Right? Now you can't do that. Right? To put a new semiconductor factory in place, it's several years, depending on which technology you're talking about. And so, yeah, there are some lessons learned. And I think the lessons learned are, we're an ecosystem and we need to work together. And we need to, give each other sort of long-term, we need to align on long-term trends and ensure that there is enough capacity and we're all in this together.
Meantime, you've got many chip industry folks, at least that I talked to, saying that Moore's Law is slowing down or maybe even has ended. We cannot rely on that familiar cadence of chips getting smaller, faster, cheaper every single year. Would you agree with that? And if so, what is the next chapter of innovation for the chip industry? What's going to propel such a vital industry forward?
Well, I have to say, Emily, look, I grew up as a process engineer. Okay, so when when I was in college and sort of grad school, I'd go into the fab in my bunny suits and make devices. And so I don't think I would ever say Moore's Law is dead. That's not the terminology I would use. I would say Moore's Law is slowed. Yeah, for sure. Moore's Law is slowed. It's gotten a lot harder to get that next step of, increasing density in transistors and reducing costs. And so we have to be more innovative. But the one thing that I can say is that, engineers are incredibly creative, right? So you give them a set of problems and they find a way of solving it. Like, 10 years ago, people used to say, well, 1 micron is the last generation. And then they said half a micron was the last generation. Then they said, a tenth of a micron was the last generation. And now we're talking about, 5 nanometer, 3 nanometer, 2 nanometer, and beyond. So there is still the opportunity to scale. It's a lot harder and more expensive. And so what many of us have been working on, certainly, my philosophy is, hey, let's look at the fundamental physical limits that are existing in semiconductor technology, and then let's find a way to break it. And so one of the things that a lot of people are working on, including ourselves at AMD, are things like chiplet technologies, where we break up what used to be one big chip into multiple chips, and packaging technology. I think that's one big step. I think the work that's being done around architectures and optimizing hardware and software architectures is another big step. And there's a lot of areas where we can continue to extend the innovation. So let's call it there's a beyond Moore's Law set of innovations, but there's a tremendous amount of effort. I think scaling will continue to be important. So process technology and it will continue to be very, very important, but we need to do things on top of that, like 3D packaging, like architectural innovations, and that's very much being done by the industry.
Now, if Moore's Law is slowing down, does that change what the industry needs in terms of a skill set for new employees, new entrants? Do they need to be focusing or come from a different kind of science background or a different kind of engineering background?
I think the fundamental principles are still very much the same, Emily. Like when I think about the things that, are taught in school, the fundamental principles around, physics and hardware and software and how they interact are very much the same. What it does require, though, is probably, this notion of we're going to always be continuing to learn. So like it doesn't stop, right? It's not like you're not going to do the same job for 20 years in your career. Like there's no such thing. And frankly, there hasn't been any such thing. The technology is constantly evolving. And so I think for us, like when I talk to people and who are sort of new in their career, it's about trying to make sure that you're continuing to learn in every job that you take. Because like for example, today in the semiconductor industry, as important as it is to get our hardware solutions there, it's also important to understand a lot about the system solutions. Thinking about where your chips are going, where they're going to be used, will help you actually build better solutions. Thinking about how software interacts with hardware, machine learning and AI is sort of a big trend right now. And thinking about how architectures evolve in that way. And so what I like to believe is that you sort of get trained in how to solve problems. It's not like you're getting trained in sort of just like one myopic part of the industry. So we're training ourselves in how to solve problems, how to build great products, and over time, the product may change, but the problem solving doesn't necessarily actually is a skill set that's very important.
Tell us a little bit more about your story. I mean, you are such a rare CEO. I know that you moved from Taiwan to the US at a young age. You told me you played with your brother's toys. I think so many people out there want to know how you did it, what they can do for their children, to lay a path forward.
Well, I think, Emily, I've had sort of, let's call it, there's always a combination of skills and a little bit of luck in these things. But I've always sort of been curious. And what I encourage is really that curiosity is a great thing. So, yeah, I did take apart my brother's model cars. Actually, what happened is it stopped working one day. And I was wondering, why did it stop working? Let's open it up. And, there was a loose wire. And so the wire needed to be reconnected and it started working again. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. But I think it is that familiarity with, my passion was around building things that you could touch and see and feel. And I think that's the beauty of hardware, right? I mean, software, I know software is really cool and sexy and all that, but you're coding, so you can't really see it. Whereas in hardware, you can actually build a product and you can actually see the product and feel a product. And, you can walk down to the store, the Best Buy and say, oh, wow, my chip is in that product. It's kind of very cool. I think the, education is very important, getting a good, sound, firm education, and then, really on the job training. So, for engineers, it's really about experience in building products and having opportunities to, work on teams. And I've had a chance to do that. And, when I sort of grew up at IBM, and every 2 years I did a different job. And that means, every 2 years you get a different experience to sort of add to your experience base. And so those are some of the things that were helpful for me.
Not everyone is either born with that instinct to break things apart and put them back together, or given the opportunity to do it, even though they might have the aptitude to. How do we get more young girls, especially, involved in STEM at earlier ages so that we can have more Lisa Sues?
Well, it's a great point, Emily. I think what people need is sort of just maybe a little bit of push in the right direction. And what that means is, sort of opportunity. So I really love, sort of seeing some of the programs that are out there, because it is all about, exposure, especially at a young age. So, things like, the first robotics competitions that are out there, in schools today, where people get to tinker around with that, or programs like, Girls Who Code, or, things where, we've done some things on our site here because, we have a large exposure to the PC business. We've had, sort of build your own PC, for the first time. And, I think once people get a chance to see how fun it is to actually build things, I think that's how we build that aptitude. But I do think, Emily, there, more programs, more exposure, particularly, we were talking before the program started about the pipeline. And that's, sort of, this is before university, but really in that, sort of junior high school, getting more exposure, and then ensuring that we encourage that through internships, through, like, for example, for me, what was really helpful is my first undergraduate assignment was actually working in a semiconductor lab, right? So that was the first time I touched some semiconductors, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So I think giving people the opportunity to experience what it's like to build hardware, to be part of it, and to see the impact that you can have is really important to make this a more attractive industry for women and underrepresented minorities.
How do you think about making the chip industry in particular more attractive? Once, graduates have these skills, maybe they're looking at a Google or a Facebook. How do we get them to join the semiconductor industry?
Yeah, so the most important thing is just even knowledge of the semiconductor industry. So one of the big reasons that this Women's Leadership Initiative exists, actually, Jody and I talked about it a couple of years ago, is we wanted to expose more women to semiconductors, and especially at the university level. And it's things like understanding the impact that we have on people's lives. Like, there is a real desire that, when people are in universities, to work on something that's important in the world. And so I think more education about semiconductors, more opportunities, more internships that are available. So many of the member companies that are part of GSA are very active in recruiting on campuses to get more internships available. And I know that that's a big focus for this Women's Leadership Initiative, to try to make it, sort of more easier to locate these things, and then continuing to make sure that people understand what semiconductors can do. Because I think you're right. I think that this is as much about getting people excited about the industry as anything else.
How important is it to, once you're there, to have diverse teams driving innovation, driving engineering? I'm curious if you've ever had an aha moment on an engineering team that wouldn't have happened if you didn't have a diverse set of perspectives and opinions in the room.
Oh, absolutely, Emily. I mean, it is clear as day that teams that are diverse with different perspectives, and it's not just men and women, but it's people from different backgrounds. Like, I like to have teams that have people with a very deeply technical background, as well as people who have more of a sales and external perspective and a customer background, as well as men and women because what it does is it gives you a broader set of ideas in terms of what's the best way to approach a problem. And I've seen it, case after case after case, where you're in a room and you're trying to solve sort of a difficult problem, and you won't imagine where the best idea comes from, right? You want the most diverse set of ideas to get that out there, and people just think about things differently. I mean, this whole thing about sort of you're a product of your background and of how you grew up and where you work. I mean, it's absolutely true. So for sure, diversity is not just a nice to have. It's a business imperative to make sure that you build the best teams, to make sure that you build the best products, and also to make sure that you're marketing and selling to half the population in a way that resonates with them. So all of those things make diversity a business imperative, and not just sort of this nice to have thing that people talk about.
Well, and then there's obviously attracting women to the industry and then getting them to stay there. I mean, I found in my research that women are dropping out at every stage as their career progresses or is supposed to progress. Did you ever fight that urge? Did you ever fight through moments where you didn't feel like you belonged? And what do we do for other women to get through that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I wouldn't say that I've quite gone through that myself, but I have gone through that with many, many people that I've sort of watched their careers or I've mentored over time. And I think the most important thing for us as employers to do for women is to allow them to make their own choices with the right amount of flexibility. And I think, what I've seen is, cases where, women were sort of, felt uncomfortable to say what was really on their mind, right? So whenever they have a family situation they want to deal with, they didn't want to tell their boss, or they didn't feel comfortable, telling their boss about things that they needed flexibility on, or they just felt like, their voices weren't heard. And I think our job at companies, when we talk about building a diverse and inclusive culture, it is about ensuring that everybody feels comfortable with what's on their mind, the flexibility that they need, the opportunities are available. And it's definitely work to build that inclusive culture, but it's definitely doable. And it's definitely on everyone's mind to do, because at the end of the day, we want to have the most talented workforce, right? And to do that, frankly, people have a choice with what they do. There's so many choices out there. We want to make sure that the semiconductor industry, the hardware industry, and then I can be very parochial that our company AMD, that we attract the best and the brightest, and that we keep them. And that means that you have to be more flexible, that you have to have, the opportunities available, and you have to sort of adapt to the needs of the workforce.
And then what about in leadership in particular? Not just women in the bunny suit in the lab, but in the chief executive office. Do we need to be more intentional? Do we need more mentorship programs? Does the culture need to change in order to have more women leaders in the chip industry?
Well, I do think that, I sort of have this belief that, leaders are trained. They're not necessarily born, because everybody has to learn sort of leadership attributes. And so I am a big believer in, sort of there's a dual responsibility in managing careers, right? The leadership team, like, for example, myself, my leadership team, we have a responsibility to build a diverse leadership pipeline. And that just doesn't happen without work. And that work means, identifying women who are early in their career, ensuring that they have the right opportunities, ensuring that they get some training, they get a chance to, frankly, try different positions and make a few mistakes, because you learn from your mistakes. And then, sort of go through that career progression. So that is sort of a whole pathway that has to go into place. It does take time. It does take work. It does take intentional, sort of work. But, again, I believe that is being done. And then on the other side, what I would say is the responsibilities on the side of, sort of young, high potential women, to also, take control of your own career and talk about what's important to you. I've found in many cases women are very shy in sort of talking about what's important to you. Talk about what's important to you. Make sure that people know what are your aspirations, and then look for that mentorship opportunity. Look for those, sort of that next big thing that you can do, so that it goes from both ways. So it goes from corporations have to set and ensure that there's a clearer path. And I think we also want to encourage and give women confidence that you will absolutely have those paths available to you.
So let's talk about what you want next and AMD's next big thing. I know nobody likes to be defined by their competitors, but analysts often mention AMD in the same breath as one other big company out there in particular. Do you think that AMD has achieved now the technical leadership and scale where that's not necessary? Or do you need something else, whether it's an acquisition, 10 more points of market share, $10 billion more in sales?
Well, Emily, I will say that I'm proud of what we've accomplished as a team. We, and when I say we, I mean the entire AMD team. It's been a journey, and it's been a very fun journey, but we're nowhere near as done. So let's be clear. I think, my definition of success is if people were to look back at, sort of on the last 10 years of AMD and say, this is a true technology leader, right? This is, and we're all about high performance computing and leading in high performance computing. That's where my passion is. That's where our expertise is. And we're pushing the envelope every day on what happens in computing. I believe that we made a lot of progress. I also believe in tech, you're defined by, your latest product. And so I'm always reminding the team, we're defined by our latest product. So we have a lot to go. But our roadmap decisions, I think I've mentioned this to you before, our roadmap decisions are made like 3 to 5 years in advance, right? So we're making decisions now for 2025. And I have to say, I've said this to my team, I've said, man, it's going to be so much fun when we can tell people about this new cool thing that we have slated for 2024 and 2025. So you're going to see a lot more from AMD, but it's mostly around how do we push high performance computing to the next level. We're excited. We're in the process of acquiring Xilinx, which is another fantastic technology company. And as we put those together, scale is important, but I believe we're on a good track with that scale.
So are acquisitions on that roadmap potentially? I mean, there's been a lot of consolidation in the chip industry over the years. There's been consolidation over the last year, and also attempted consolidation that hasn't yet happened or closed.
Yeah, I think acquisitions are certainly one aspect that's important. My philosophy is, like, the baseline strategy is very important. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here to put out great technology and great products to help our customers and our partners sort of change the world. So, I mean, that's sort of job one. To do that, sometimes you need more technology, right? So, as I mentioned, we were very excited about acquiring Xilinx because they have some, they're really the leader in adaptive computing. And so together with our microprocessors, adaptive computing is very important. You may see acquisitions from us, going forward. Sure. I think scale is very important, and especially filling out the technology envelope is important. But, the basics are around continuing, to push the envelope on what's possible.
Any thoughts on NVIDIA ARM and whether or not that's good or bad for the industry at this point?
I think this is the Wish conference, Emily. I'm not sure that there was like industry prognostications in there. So yeah, no, I would leave that to the other folks for that.
So let's talk about this. Obviously, AMD is a global company. You are headquartered in Texas. There's, becoming a flashpoint in Texas now with this new abortion law. Some CEOs seem to be turning it into an opportunity to recruit talent. Mark Benioff just said he's going to pay to move everyone who wants to out of Texas. As a CEO, how do you think about these situations, especially when it comes to recruiting and the culture of your company?
Yeah, well, the way I would say is, look, over the last, I would say 12 to 24 months, I think we've all been just surprised with the number of things that have come up that, we're a tech company, but the number of things that have come up that are not technology related, right? I mean, if you think about what we've been through for the last 18 months with COVID, that has been sort of, felt differently in different parts of the world. I mean, we are a very global company, and frankly, we have probably a little less than half of our population in the United States, but we're very large in Canada, we're very large in Asia, India, China, Europe, and there are lots of different aspects there. So I would say that in general, our goal is to make sure that our employees have a very inclusive culture when they come to work at AMD. That's our first and foremost priority. People have been thinking about what they want to do as it relates to, I think the world is now a different place, right? COVID has changed that. So this idea of where do you actually work has changed. And, that might mean you want more flexibility. We have all kinds of people who want to move from California to Texas for, a number of reasons. And, there may be, other social reasons, as you said, that people might want to do different things. Our job is to make sure that we do have that inclusive culture and that we're sensitive to what people's needs are. But, we're operating in such a global environment. There's so many things going on in any given company, any given country on any given day. I would say that, we just kind of, take that as one step at a time and what it means for our employees.
So when you look at the mega trends shaping the future of the chip industry, what stands out to you? What are you most excited about? Where do you see the most opportunity? Everyone seems to be talking about the Metaverse, and half the world doesn't even understand what that is or will be.
Yeah, I would say, my view of the world is it's about high performance computing, and that perhaps is something that people can understand. At the end of the day, there is more that we can do with semiconductors and with computing to make our lives and the world a better place. And I'm excited about that. And the way I think about it is, if you think about, again, I'm going to just contextualize to what we've been going through the last 12 months. The fact is, before the last 18 months, who would have thought we could do all of these things virtually? Like nobody would have thought that. Like nobody would have even dreamed of wanting to do these things virtually. But you can do it now because computing is ubiquitous. You have these great cloud infrastructures that allow you to do that. You have all of these collaboration tools. That's a direct relationship to what we've been able to do with semiconductors. When you think about what we do with supercomputing, okay, the fact that you could get COVID vaccines together in like 12 months or less, like nobody would have thought that was possible, right? That comes with the computing power that has been available, just tremendous capability, to go through that. And then when you fast forward 5 years and you think about what machine learning and AI can do for you, and the fact is we can all be so much more productive and so much more capable with what computing can do for you. So that's sort of my view on the world, and there's a lot more that can be done. Like we're still in the infancy of what we can use technology for, and people don't quite understand that yet. So I think that's what we have to unveil, is that whatever you thought you could do today, you can do like 100 times more with the power of compute that we're bringing to the industry over the next 10 years.
Well, I would have loved to have done this in person, but barring that, it's been wonderful to speak with you virtually, Lisa. Thank you for joining us. And I know everyone in the audience is just so thrilled that they got to hear from you today. So
thank you so much, Emily. It's wonderful to be with you, and appreciate you joining us for this as well.